In a quiet house on Elm Street lived the Okoro family. Obinna worked long hours at the factory, while Nkechi taught at the local primary school. Their daughter Kayamika was 16, restless, and always fighting sleep. Her younger brother Chibuzo slept like a baby every night. But Kayamika? She would toss and turn, staring at the ceiling for hours. Her mind raced with thoughts about school, friends, and the strange dreams that visited her when she finally dozed off. The dreams were always the same, dark figures standing at the foot of her bed, watching her with eyes that glowed like embers. She would wake gasping, her sheets soaked with sweat, but the figures were never there when she turned on the light. This particular night felt different though. The house creaked more than usual, and shadows seemed to move in ways that made her skin crawl. Even the familiar sounds felt wrong. The hum of the refrigerator seemed too loud, the tick of the wall clock too sharp. At exactly midnight, she gave up trying to sleep. Her bare feet touched the cold wooden floor as she crept toward her bedroom door. The hallway stretched before her like a dark tunnel. Every step down the stairs felt too loud, each creak echoing through the silent house. She held her breath, listening for any sign that she had woken her family. Nothing. Just the tick of the old wall clock and her own heartbeat drumming in her ears. The living room welcomed her with familiar comfort. Moonlight streamed through the curtains, casting gentle patterns on the carpet. The same patterns she had watched as a child, lying on this very floor during family movie nights. Those were happier times, when the darkness felt safe and the house felt like a fortress against the world outside. Kayamika pulled the remote from the coffee table and pointed it at the large television. The screen came alive with a warm, blue glow that pushed away the darkness. She kept the volume barely above a whisper and wrapped herself in her mother's soft blanket. The fabric smelled like her mother's perfume and laundry detergent, bringing back memories of being small and sick, curled up on the couch while Nkechi brought her soup and medicine. The couch hugged her body as she settled in, finally feeling some peace. A late-night sitcom was playing reruns of episodes she had seen before. The laugh track felt like friendly company in the empty house, like having invisible friends who understood her loneliness. For the first time in hours, her shoulders relaxed. This was exactly what she needed, just her and the TV, no pressure to sleep, no racing thoughts. The characters on screen joked and smiled, their problems simple and easily solved in 30 minutes. Kayamika found herself smiling too, forgetting about her insomnia and the strange feeling that had been following her all day. She promised herself just one episode before heading back upstairs. Halfway through the show, something strange happened. The picture began to stutter like an old VHS tape that had been played too many times. The characters froze mid-sentence, their faces twisted into unnatural expressions that looked more like masks than human faces. The familiar laugh track cut off suddenly, leaving only harsh static that made her ears ring and her teeth ache. The sound felt alive somehow, like thousands of insects buzzing in perfect unison. Kayamika reached for the remote, but before she could change the channel, the static cleared. What she saw made her blood run cold and her stomach drop to her feet. The TV was showing her living room. The same couch she was sitting on. The same coffee table with its scratched wooden surface. The same curtains her mother had sewn by hand last Christmas. Even the same moonlight patterns on the carpet, falling in exact lines across the worn fabric. But there she was on screen, wrapped in the blanket, staring at the television. It was like looking into a mirror, except mirrors don't show you from across the room. Her hands trembled as she studied the image, searching for some sign that this was a recording or a trick. Everything was perfect, down to the smallest detail. The way her hair fell across her shoulder in that messy way she hated. The wrinkles in the blanket where her knees pressed up. Even the remote in her hand, pointing at the screen like an accusation. Then she noticed something that made her heart stop beating. In the far corner of the room, behind her on-screen reflection, stood a tall figure. It was dark and shapeless, like a shadow that had learned to stand upright and breathe. The figure didn't move, didn't sway, didn't show any signs of life, just stood there watching her with an intensity she could feel through the screen. Its presence radiated a coldness that seemed to seep through the television and into her bones. Kayamika spun around so fast her neck popped and sent sharp pain down her spine. Her eyes searched the corner frantically, sweeping every inch of the familiar space. Empty. Nothing but her father's reading chair with its worn brown leather and a tall lamp that had stood there for as long as she could remember. The lamp's shade hung slightly crooked, just as it always did. She whipped back to face the TV, her heart hammering against her ribs, but now it was showing a commercial for laundry detergent. A smiling woman held up a bright white shirt while cheerful music played, completely normal and innocent. The woman's voice was warm and friendly, promising cleaner clothes and happier families. Normal. Ordinary. Safe. Kayamika's chest heaved as she tried to catch her breath. Her hands shook so badly she dropped the remote onto the carpet. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the quiet room, like a gunshot echoing through a cathedral. She looked at the corner again, then back at the TV. Just commercials. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of what she had seen. Maybe she was more tired than she thought. Maybe her eyes were playing tricks on her. But deep down, she knew what she had witnessed was real. Kayamika grabbed the remote and stabbed the power button with her thumb like she was trying to kill it. The screen went black, reflecting only her own pale face staring back with wide, terrified eyes. She looked like a ghost herself, all hollow cheeks and dark circles from too many sleepless nights. She threw off the blanket and ran toward the stairs, her feet barely touching the ground. Behind her, the living room fell into darkness, but she could feel something watching her retreat. The shadows seemed to reach out with invisible fingers, trying to grab her ankles and pull her back to the couch. She took the steps 3 at a time, not caring about the noise anymore. If she woke her family, at least she wouldn't be alone with whatever was happening downstairs. Her bedroom door slammed shut behind her with a bang that shook the walls, and she dove under her covers like a child hiding from monsters that lived under the bed. But even buried under blankets that smelled like fabric softener and safety, she couldn't stop thinking about that corner. The way the figure had stood so still, so patient, like a hunter waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Like it was waiting for something. She pressed her pillow over her head, trying to block out the memory. It was just her imagination. Had to be. People didn't appear on TV screens that weren't supposed to show anything but programs. Her heart gradually slowed to normal rhythm. Her breathing became steady again. Sleep finally took her as the first hints of dawn crept through her window. But even in her dreams, she could feel something watching her from dark corners. The next evening, Kayamika sat at the dinner table picking at her rice and stew. The familiar smell of palm oil and spices should have made her hungry, but her stomach felt twisted in knots. Her mother kept asking if she felt okay, noting the dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. Even Chibuzo noticed, pausing between bites of his food to stare at his older sister with concern. "You look like a ghost," he said with the blunt honesty that only little brothers possessed. Chibuzo chattered about his day at school, sharing stories about his friends and teachers, but the words sounded far away like voices calling through thick fog. All she could think about was the TV downstairs, waiting for her in the darkness like a patient predator. As night fell and her family went to bed with their usual goodnights and gentle kisses, she lay in her room staring at the ceiling. The same ceiling she had stared at for years, with its familiar crack that looked like a lightning bolt. She had promised herself she would never go downstairs at night again. She would stay in bed, read a book, listen to music, anything but watch that cursed television. But curiosity gnawed at her like hunger, growing stronger with each passing minute. What if it happened again? What if she had imagined it all? The question spun in her mind until she couldn't take it anymore. At 11:30, she crept out of bed and tiptoed down the hall. The stairs seemed longer tonight, each step an eternity. The living room waited in darkness. She stood in the doorway for a long moment, her hand on the light switch. She could turn around right now and go back to bed. Forget the whole thing. But her feet carried her to the couch anyway. Her trembling finger found the power button. This time the TV turned on normally. A movie was playing, something old with black and white actors speaking dramatic lines about love and betrayal. The film looked like it was from the 1950s, full of shadows and cigarette smoke and women with perfect curls. Kayamika relaxed slightly and settled into the cushions, pulling her legs up under her. See? Everything was fine. She was being silly, letting her imagination run wild like a child afraid of monsters in the closet. But as she watched the movie, the screen gradually darkened until it showed only her reflection. Not a program, not static, just her face looking back from the black screen like she was staring into dark water. She leaned forward to get a better look, studying her own features in the strange mirror, and her reflection leaned forward too. Normal. Then she tilted her head to the right, curious to see how clear the image was. Her reflection paused for just a moment, like a video buffering, before following. That wasn't normal. Kayamika jerked back, but her reflection moved smoothly, almost gracefully. Like it was dancing to different music, following its own rhythm. She raised her hand and waved tentatively. Her reflection waited 3 full seconds before waving back. Then it smiled, a slow, cold smile that Kayamika wasn't making. Her own face felt frozen in horror, every muscle tight with fear, but the reflection kept smiling wider and wider until the expression became grotesque. The reflection's eyes seemed to glow with their own light, and its teeth looked too sharp, too white. The screen flickered and changed to show grainy black and white footage that looked like it was filmed through a dirty window. Kayamika found herself looking at her own kitchen, but it was empty and silent like a photograph. The familiar table where she ate breakfast every morning, the stove where her mother cooked their meals, the refrigerator covered in Chibuzo's drawings and school notices. Then her mother Nkechi appeared in the frame, walking slowly like she was underwater. She sat at the table with her head in her hands, her shoulders shaking with quiet sobs that seemed to echo from somewhere deep inside her chest. Kayamika had never seen her mother cry like this. Broken and desperate, like someone had ripped her heart out. The image was so clear she could see individual tears falling onto the wooden table, each drop spreading into a small dark circle. The footage felt voyeuristic, like she was spying through a window into her mother's most private moment. Then footsteps echoed through the TV speakers, heavy and deliberate. Her father Obina entered the frame, but he looked different. Angry. Tired. Lines of frustration etched deep around his eyes and mouth. He approached Nkechi and began speaking, his mouth moving rapidly, but no sound came through. His gestures were sharp and frustrated, his hands cutting through the air like knives. Nkechi shrank back in her chair like she was afraid. This couldn't be real. Her parents didn't fight. They barely raised their voices at each other. But the footage looked so genuine, so raw. The way the light fell across their faces, the familiar scratch on the kitchen table, even the slight crack in the wall behind them, every detail was perfect. When was this filmed? How was this filmed? There were no cameras in their kitchen. The next morning at breakfast, Kayamika studied her parents carefully. Her mother hummed while scrambling eggs, her usual cheerful self. Her father read the newspaper and made jokes about the weather. Everything seemed normal, happy even. But Kayamika couldn't forget the image of her mother crying. She cleared her throat nervously. "Mama, are you okay? You seem tired lately." Nkechi laughed and ruffled Kayamika's hair. "I slept like a baby, my dear." "Why would you ask?" Her father looked up from his paper with raised eyebrows. "Your mother is fine. We're all fine. Why these strange questions?" Kayamika forced a smile and shrugged. "Just checking." But doubt crept into her chest like cold water. Either the TV was showing her lies, or her parents were hiding something serious. Both options terrified her. She spent the day watching for signs of trouble between them. Every glance, every word, every silence felt loaded with hidden meaning. Were they pretending to be happy for her and Chibuzo? What else might they be hiding? That night, Kayamika tried to stay in bed. She really did. She read a book, counted sheep, even tried meditation techniques she found online. But at midnight, her feet touched the floor again. She was like a moth drawn to dangerous flames. The TV waited for her in the darkness, patient as always. This time it showed her little brother's room. But the image was all wrong. Chibuzzo stood beside his bed, perfectly still, his eyes wide and empty. He looked like he was sleepwalking, but his movements were too controlled, too purposeful. As she watched in horror, her brother walked to his bedroom door and opened it silently. The hallway stretched before him, dark and endless. He began walking toward the back door of the house, his bare feet making no sound on the wooden floors. His face was blank, expressionless, like he wasn't really there anymore. Kayamika shot up from the couch and ran upstairs as fast as she could. She burst into Chibuzzo's room without knocking. He was there, fast asleep in his bed, snoring softly. His covers were tucked around him exactly as they should be. She shook him gently. "Buzo? Are you okay?" He mumbled and turned over, still deep in sleep. The next day dragged by like a year. Kayamika jumped at every sound, studied every shadow, watched her family with new eyes. How could she tell them what she was seeing? They would think she was losing her mind. Maybe she was. Normal TVs didn't show impossible things. Normal girls didn't see their families in ways that couldn't be real. She found herself unplugging the television during the day, wrapping the cord carefully and hiding it behind the entertainment center. But every evening, as darkness fell and her family settled into sleep, she found her hands rewinding the cord and pushing the plug back into the wall. It was like she had no choice in the matter. Her body moved on its own, drawn by a force she couldn't understand or resist. She tried telling herself it was just curiosity. She needed to understand what was happening. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. Something was calling to her through that screen, and she was too weak to ignore it. The rational part of her mind screamed warnings, but her feet kept carrying her downstairs. On the fourth night, the static cleared to reveal something that made her soul freeze. A stranger sat in the very chair she was sitting in. He was pale and gaunt, with hollow cheeks and eyes that seemed too large for his face. His clothes looked old-fashioned, like something from decades past. But worst of all, he was staring directly at the camera. Directly at her. His lips moved like he was speaking, but no sound came through the TV speakers. Kayamika leaned closer, trying to read his lips. The man's mouth formed words over and over, "Come closer. Come closer." His eyes never blinked, never looked away from hers. She felt like she was falling into those dark depths. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Her breath came out in small puffs of mist. The man raised one skeletal finger and pointed directly at her. Not at the TV, not at the room, at her specifically. Like he could see through the screen into her soul. His mouth opened wider than should be possible, revealing rows of teeth that looked too sharp, too many. Then he began to lean forward, getting closer to his camera, which meant getting closer to her. The next morning brought whispers. Kayamika caught her parents talking quietly in the kitchen, their voices too low to understand. When she entered the room, they stopped abruptly. Her father cleared his throat and went back to his coffee. Her mother started washing dishes with unusual focus. "What were you talking about?" Kayamika asked, trying to sound casual. "Nothing important, dear," her mother replied without turning around. But her father shot Nkechi a look that said otherwise. Chibuzzo bounced into the kitchen asking for breakfast, and the tension broke. But Kayamika noticed other things throughout the day. Her parents checking locks twice. Her mother peering out windows for no reason. Her father asking strange questions about whether she or Chibuzzo had been walking around at night. They were worried about something, but they wouldn't tell her what. During dinner, she caught them exchanging those looks again. The kind of glances parents share when they're trying to protect their children from bad news. What did they know? What were they hiding? And did it have anything to do with what she was seeing on the TV? That night, as Kayamika settled onto the couch, something felt different. The air was thicker, harder to breathe. The TV showed her sitting there as usual, but now the pale man stood directly behind her on screen. He was so close she should have been able to feel his breath on her neck. But when she looked over her shoulder, the space behind the couch was empty. On screen, the man raised his hand and placed it on her shoulder. At that exact moment, Kayamika felt ice-cold fingers grip her real shoulder. She spun around frantically, but nothing was there. Just empty air and shadows. Then came the knocking. Soft taps on the living room window, like someone asking politely to come inside. Tap. 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 The curtain swayed slightly even though there was no wind. She hadn't opened any windows. The house was sealed tight against the cool night air. But something outside wanted in. The knocking came again, more insistent this time. She crept toward the window, her heart hammering against her ribs. Her hand reached for the curtain, trembling like a leaf in a storm. The next day, Kayamika went to her father's closet and found his old video camera. If she was going crazy, at least she would have proof. If she wasn't crazy, she would have evidence that no one could deny. That evening, she set up the camera pointing at the TV and pressed record. She spent 3 hours watching the same impossible footage, herself, her family, the pale stranger. Everything exactly as she had seen before. But when she played back the tape the next morning, her stomach dropped. 3 hours of empty static. Nothing else. The tape showed only gray snow and soft hissing sounds. No images, no people, no proof. She rewound and played it again. Still nothing. But she knew what she had seen. Her eyes hadn't lied to her. The TV had shown her things that couldn't exist, yet somehow did. She threw the tape across her room in frustration. It hit the wall and scattered into pieces. Why couldn't the camera see what she saw? Why was she the only one who could witness these impossible things? Was she chosen for some reason, or was she cursed? Paranoia grew in Kayamika's chest like a living thing. She began watching her family with suspicious eyes, looking for signs of the trouble she had seen on screen. During breakfast, her father snapped at her mother over something small, spilled coffee on his newspaper. The exact same angry expression she had seen on the TV. Her mother's face crumpled in the same hurt way. It was happening. The footage was coming true, or maybe it had always been true and she just hadn't noticed. How long had her parents been unhappy? How long had they been pretending everything was fine? She studied every interaction, every word, every silence. When her mother hugged her goodnight, Kayamika searched her eyes for signs of the tears she had witnessed. When her father asked about her day, she listened for the frustrated tone she had heard through the TV speakers. Her trust in her family began to crack like ice on a frozen pond. If they were lying about being happy, what else were they hiding? Could she believe anything they told her anymore? Kayamika woke up on the couch. This was wrong, she remembered going to bed in her room. The blanket was tucked around her like someone else had covered her while she slept. The TV was on, showing static that looked almost alive, swirling and moving in patterns that hurt her eyes. She had no memory of coming downstairs, no memory of turning on the television. But here she was at 3 in the morning, and she had no idea how she got here. Fear crept up her spine like cold fingers. She tried to remember falling asleep in her bed, but the memory felt fuzzy and distant. Had she sleepwalked? She had never done that before. The static on screen began to clear, and she saw herself sleeping on this very couch. But the image was filmed from above, like someone was floating on the ceiling looking down at her. Who was holding the camera? What was watching her sleep? She scrambled off the couch and ran upstairs, taking the steps 3 at a time. Her bedroom door was open, her bed empty and unmade. She really had been sleepwalking. But something had guided her to the TV. The next night, Kayamika fought against the pull. She locked her bedroom door and shoved her desk chair under the handle. She wasn't going downstairs. She wasn't watching that cursed TV anymore. But at midnight, she woke up on the couch again. The locked door, the barricaded chair, none of it had stopped her. The TV showed the same aerial view of her sleeping form, But now the pale man stood behind the couch, leaning over her like a doctor examining a patient. His bony hand reached toward her shoulder on screen. The moment his fingers made contact with her image, Kayamika felt that same ice-cold grip on her real shoulder. She jerked awake and spun around. Empty space. Always empty space. But the feeling lingered. Cold fingerprints on her skin that wouldn't go away no matter how hard she rubbed them. She was losing control of her own body. Something was calling her downstairs every night, and she was powerless to resist it. The TV had become her master, and she was just a puppet dancing to its twisted tune. At breakfast, Kayamika finally broke down. The words poured out of her like water from a broken dam. She told her parents everything: the impossible footage, the pale stranger, the sleepwalking, the feeling of being watched and touched by invisible hands. Her mother's face went through several expressions: concern, confusion, and finally annoyance. Her father set down his coffee cup with a sharp clink. "Kayamika, you're scaring your brother with these ghost stories," he said firmly. Chibuzo looked up from his cereal with wide, interested eyes. "Are there really ghosts in our TV, Kayamika?" "No," their father said before she could answer. "Your sister has been watching too many horror movies. There are no ghosts anywhere." But Kayamika saw something else in her father's eyes. Fear. He believed her, or at least part of him did. Her mother forced a laugh. "Maybe you should see a doctor, dear. Sometimes stress can make us imagine things." Alone again. No one who would help her or believe her. She was fighting this battle by herself. That night, the TV didn't show the living room. Instead, it showed the upstairs hallway of their house. The same hallway Kayamika walked through every day. But now it looked different, darker, more sinister. The pale man was there, climbing the stairs one step at a time. His movements were wrong, too fluid, like he was floating instead of walking. He paused outside each bedroom door, pressing his ear against the wood as if listening for something. First her parents' room. Then Chibuzo's. Then hers. At each door, he smiled that terrible smile and moved on. Kayamika couldn't breathe. She ran upstairs to check, her feet flying over the steps. The hallway was empty and normal. Moonlight streamed through the window at the far end, casting familiar shadows. She checked each room, her parents sleeping peacefully, Chibuzo snoring softly, everything as it should be. But when she crept back downstairs, the TV still showed the pale man in the hallway. Two different realities existing at the same time. Which one was real? Which one was the lie? The image changed to something that stole her breath. The TV showed her sitting on the couch, but something was horribly wrong. Her on-screen self wasn't moving, wasn't breathing. Her eyes were wide and staring, but empty of life. Her skin was pale and waxy like a mannequin. She looked dead. Completely, utterly dead. Behind her corpse, the pale man loomed with his hands on her shoulders, claiming his prize. His mouth moved in silent words that she somehow understood: mine now. Always mine. This was her future. This was what he had been working toward all along. Not just to watch her, but to take her. To add her to whatever collection of souls he kept in that dark realm behind the screen. The TV cut to static, but the image burned in her mind. Her own dead face staring at nothing. Her own empty eyes reflecting a horror she couldn't escape. She tried to stand up from the couch, but her legs wouldn't move. Her body felt heavy, sluggish, like she was already halfway between life and death. The pale man's claim on her was growing stronger each night. She heard them then, footsteps walking across the living room floor. But she wasn't moving. Her feet were tucked under her on the couch. Someone else was in the room, invisible but undeniably present. The footsteps moved closer, circling the couch like a predator stalking prey. She gripped the blanket tighter, as if fabric could protect her from whatever was coming. The air grew colder with each step. Her breath came out in visible puffs, and frost began forming on the TV screen. The footsteps stopped directly behind her. She could feel a presence looming over her shoulder, could smell something like old earth and decay. But when she turned to look, nothing was there. Just empty space that felt too full, too alive. The footsteps started again, moving toward the TV. On screen, static swirled in patterns that looked almost like faces, dozens of pale, dead faces pressing against the inside of the screen like prisoners trying to escape. Were these other people who had been taken? Other victims of the pale man's hunger? Their mouths moved in silent screams that she felt in her bones. A thunderous knock shook the TV screen from the inside. Something was trying to break out. The static grew brighter, more violent, filling the room with harsh white light. The entire house began to vibrate like a tuning fork. Pictures rattled on the walls, and dishes clinked in the kitchen cabinets. The knocking came again, stronger this time. Cracks appeared across the TV screen, spiderwebbing outward from the center. Whatever was trapped inside was almost free. Kayamika tried to run, but invisible hands gripped her ankles, holding her to the couch. She was the anchor that kept the pale man connected to this world. Through her nightly visits, her willingness to watch, she had given him power. She had fed him with her attention and fear. Now he was strong enough to cross over completely. The knocking became a constant thunder. The cracks spread wider. Any moment now, the screen would shatter and release whatever horror lived on the other side. She opened her mouth to scream for her family, but no sound came out. Her voice belonged to the pale man now. The next morning, Nkechi came downstairs to make breakfast. She found the TV on, displaying nothing but static that buzzed and hissed like angry insects. The couch was empty. Kayamika's favorite blanket lay crumpled on the floor in a neat pile, still holding the shape of her body. But their daughter was gone. Vanished without a trace. Obina searched every room, every closet, every possible hiding place. They called her friends, checked the hospital, contacted the police. No one had seen her. No one knew where she could be. The officers took notes and asked questions, but Kayamika had simply disappeared from a locked house in the middle of the night. There were no signs of struggle, no broken windows, no forced doors. The only clue was the TV, still glowing with that endless static. When the police tried to turn it off, it wouldn't respond. Even unplugging it did nothing, the screen continued to glow as if powered by some internal force. Nkechi stared at the static for hours, convinced she could almost see her daughter's face hidden in the swirling patterns. From that night forward, the Okoro house was never the same. Strange whispers echoed from the living room after midnight. Neighbors reported seeing lights flickering in windows that should have been dark. The family moved away within a month, unable to bear the memories and the sounds. But the TV remained, left behind for the next family to discover. Over the years, others moved into the house. Young people, mostly, couples starting out, families with children who didn't know the history. And always, someone would be drawn to that old television set. Always, someone would turn it on late at night when they couldn't sleep. Those who knew the story said you could see Kayamika sometimes, if you looked long enough at the static. Her pale face would appear for just a moment, staring out with empty eyes, warning viewers to turn away. But by then it was always too late. The pale man would be standing behind them on screen, ready to claim another soul. This is why you should never watch TV late at night. Some screens don't just show, they take. And once they have you, you can never leave. Thank you for listening to this story. What did you think about Kayamika's fate? Have you ever felt drawn to your television late at night? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and please share this story with your loved ones. Give it a thumbs up if it gave you chills, and subscribe for more tales that will keep you awake. Until I bring you another story, sweet dreams, if you can manage them.